Citizen, surgeon, and school board meeting, Andrew Sylvie. The groundbreaking ceremony was held on April 14th, 1986, and the largest elementary school opened its doors on August 31st, 1987, to approximately 450 students. It was the first three-track school in Garden City. When Victor and Ellis first opened its doors, there were no playground equipment, grass, or trees, and the roads were not paved. Staff members had to meet at a nearby school, board a bus, and shuttle to Victor and Ellis.
Thank you, guys. So a lot has changed with VO over the years. Pretty significant change, obviously. When it first opened, Victor and Ellis' population was about 60% Hispanic, 21% Asian, and then 18% white. Now our population is more along the lines of 85% Hispanic with 8% Asian, and then 7% make up the rest. In addition to our general education setting, a unique component of our school is the Rise Room. This is a low incident room that caters to 10 students. There's 8 full-time and part-time staff members there that support these students the entire time they're in the building. These students and teachers work together to promote independence through teaching and learning life skills. So they're learning things like routine, positive social interaction, hygiene. Students engage in daily academic activities as well, both in the Rise Room and in the general educational setting through inclusions. We're extremely grateful that they're a part of our school and really grateful for this program. Oops.
Okay, so our first WIG, VO is focusing on phonics and fluency for students in grades K through 2, aligning to the district's WIG. The following graphs, Mr. Reich, the following graphs illustrate VO's growth trend, ranging from typical to aggressive growth over the past 2 years and the current year, as reflected in our FastBridge data. Please keep in mind that we're in the current school year. We're not finished yet, so we have the opportunity to make that last green bar that you see grow. Based on our past and current data, we can see that the implementation of our UFly phonics curriculum has had a great impact on our building as a whole. And this would be our 3rd and 4th graders that have had less UFly instruction. I'll just throw that out there. So
our 3rd and 4th grade teachers have been focusing on developing the essential skills needed to succeed on the Kansas State assessments, which is our week 2. They have been emphasizing on a lot of CAP preparation this school year. The following graphs show our current 4th graders' CAP scores from last year. So in order for them to meet the WIG, they would need to move 7 students in both ELA and math from levels 1 and 2 to a level 3 or 4.
So when we look at that data, we went ahead and broke it down even further into subgroups. So as a total, we had 159 students last year take the CAP. We focused primarily on ELA with this breakdown. So the first column in each subgroup is the total number of students in that subgroup. Then you go to level 2, and then our level 3s and 4s are over here. The percentages on the top are the percentages of 3s or 4s that we received in each subgroup. So if you see free and reduced lunch and our Hispanic population are the main populations there, they're the higher bars, and they represent the total, roughly around 23%. The biggest disparity that we see is with our English speakers and ESL speakers. Our ESL speakers had 12% of them were in 3s or 4s, whereas our English speakers were 33%. So this allows us to focus on those populations, work on those numbers, and try to get them up to where we want them at. You guys have any questions for us?
Lisa.
All right.
right.
Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys gotta take a bit. Yeah. Where'd Roy run off to? Around. Actually, I know quite a bit of this crew from being a sub for these guys.
He's doing the communication for tomorrow.
Well, you're gonna be the pitcher.
You're the picture guy, or this is the picture guy.
I'm the photographer tonight.
You are the photographer tonight.
Okay, squeeze in.
Yeah, hey, come here, man. You got,
Stay
you
on
three.
that side, Anna go over there.
Hey, you guys gotta get in there too, let's go.
Y'all.
Let's go, Ricky, come in there.
Pictures.
I think that's part of the deal.
I don't think so. You don't need here in the.
Okay, thank you.
I know you say that.
Okay, everybody, 1, 2, 3. Got it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great job.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good job.
Good job, guys. Good job.
Good job.
Good job.
Stay warm.
Hey.
Oh, no. You good?
Stay? Who's staying?
All right, moving on to item G, consent agenda. Get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it. Okay. Motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your left hand. Okay, motion carries. Item H, board report, water assessment data.
Do we have audio for Randy online?
Probably in the office.
Hang on. Can he not hear us?
Well, I was wondering if we could hear Randy voting or.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't. I didn't give him a chance for that. Randy, can you hear us? Your show is muted right now. Okay. Come on, so there you go. All right, let's go. Go ahead.
Well, I would, but I kind of need Heather. Can you get us going here? I can start a little bit, but.
Yeah, she said he can.
Is that called a debate where you're not prepared? Wing it.
Okay. Yeah, start. Okay, so this is our winter update for Fast Bridge that we do every year. We got this to you last week, but it looks a little bit different than what we've done in the past. So we'll go through the slides and explain it a little bit. So this first slide, probably just have to push the down arrow because it's PDF. So we'll just scroll through it. The first slide, this is our early reading composite. So it's an overall score of how our students are performing. In general, we want that green bar to be bigger, thank you, because that's the kids that are above benchmark or meeting the cut score that FastBridge has set. Yellow would be what we call our tier 2 kids. They're the ones that have some risk, and then the red are our high risk students. You can tell that over time, because on the left-hand side, those are our 3-year-olds, that our green bar is getting smaller. And in particular, first grade really hits us pretty hard. The second piece of information that's on this slide is our national averages compared to our district average. So the line graph that goes across the middle, we put this in here because we wanted you to see that normally when we report this, you see ups and downs and how the kids perform. That's normal. You can see on the national averages, we see those same up and down trends as those benchmarks change. But there is still a gap between that gray and blue line, and that's that piece that we need to get closed. We need those lines to be on top of each other or the blue line to be above the gray. This slide is a little bit different than the rest of the ones you're gonna see because that gap in first grade is so wide. We know that our kids, every time I've reported this data, our first grade kids struggle the most with this fast bridge test. The rest of the way through the slides, you will see that that gray and blue bar are fairly close together. So our students are trending fairly close to the national average.
Okay, so this is our second through fourth grade. So the two bars on the left are second grade, the two in the middle are third grade, and the two on the right are the fourth grade. And just some things from fall to winter. The second grade increased by 5%, which the second grade data was really good this year for in the winter time so far. We're pleasantly surprised with second grade. And another thing I looked at was last winter at this time and this winter, like comparing those, and we were up 2% in second grade for that. Third grade went down, but when we look at the same kids from last year, they ended the spring at 39%. And right now in the winter, they're at 44%. So even though they went down from fall to winter, the cohort is increasing. And then same thing with fourth grade, they went down about 7% from the fall, but the kids, the cohort did increase 1% from last spring. Fifth grade has been a rough grade this year. We haven't seen great data out of them, and they dropped 6%. And then sixth grade dropped 7%, but if you look at spring of last year, they were at 34%, and right now they're at 41%. So they've made growth as a percentage, as a group from last spring. Go ahead. Seventh grade, they dropped just 2%. Seventh and eighth grade both dropped 2%. But when you look winter to winter, they're both up 2%. So last year's winter, this year's winter.
When you say up, you're saying they, are you referring, what groups are you referring to? The low and low risk and advanced, or what?
Right, so when we say drop, what we mean is we combine our above benchmark percentages.
Okay.
And then if those combined percentages go down, we say they dropped 2%. So they lost 2% out of the top two groups, is what they did.
You're referring to as the green and the blue.
Yes, sorry, I didn't make that very clear. Yeah, the blue is advanced or college pathway. The green would be the kids that are about where they should be, or just they have low risk. And then yellow would be some risk, and then red would be high risk. And when we're talking about risk, we're talking about if they were to go on to college, what is their chances of being successful in college? Okay, so on seventh and eighth grade, they lost 2% in those top groups, but when we look from last year to this year, they're gained 2%. Okay, and that's what
age or versus if
right.
they were seventh graders last year.
It's both. It's actually both. So the seventh graders, last year in the spring, they were eighth graders. They were at 41%, and right now they're at 45% in the winter as seventh graders. So it's both, same age, and then also same kids. We're seeing growth. It's just not happening from our fall measurement to our winter measurement.
Is it normal to have a decrease in the winter?
Yeah, we have it almost every single year. We have a decrease in the winter.
What do you think affects that?
You have a lot of transients come in, right? Or new people that come in that have not been a part of the system, right? That we're working.
Right, but I don't know that that's necessarily why. I think that, okay, so the benchmarks change as the year goes on.
They get hard.
Yep, they get harder. And so I think that we're not using two reasons. Our kids are getting better, they're just not getting better fast enough. So that's one reason. And then I think that we have an issue with rigor across the board. Like we don't get rigorous enough as the year goes on. We kind of stay at the same rigor and we aren't challenging kids enough. So two different reasons.
What do you think contributes to that?
To
The lack of rigor.
lack of rigor. I think it's teachers not believing kids can do it. And we've been working really hard this year on helping teachers to understand that all kids can do this. And I mean, that's been a focus for 3 years, is helping teachers understand that all kids can read, all kids can learn, and that we can push our kids, that they're just as capable as everyone else.
And just to piggyback, this opportunity myth, just if you've heard that terminology before, just that the opportunity is there for everybody, so.
Any other questions about that before we? And you will see on the gray and the blue lines, we're right there with the national average. And we have the same dips and gaps all the way through.
It's still concerning that we have that gap between the national average, but when we pulled this report and looked at it, we were encouraged by the fact that we're with them. You know, I think a lot of times when we report this data and report that we're seeing decreases, we think, oh my gosh, that gap's getting wider, and that's really not true for our kids, other than in first grade. First grade, when we switch over to CBM, our kids really struggle with that.
And that's the reason for that larger gap
Yes.
there between them.
Yes. At the beginning of first grade, they are only asked to read sentences, and they're given a sentence at a time. And then the kids that get through 3 pages of those sentences, then it starts to give them small paragraphs. But most of our kids can pass that sentence reading successfully by reading 3 sentences. When they get to the CBM, they're given a full page. And teachers tell us frequently that really overwhelms our kids. So we've got to get kids reading full pages sooner than what we do. And that's when we talk about, we've got to get that rigor. We've got to ask them to do those hard things so that when they're asked to do them for these assessments, it's not the first time they've been asked to do it.
Do we, sorry, my brain is kind of random. Do we teach at all, like, how to test to the kids? Because I think a lot of people get really scared from a test. And like in school, it was pretty easy for me to figure out, like there are cheats built into the test. If you don't know the answer to number 3, it might be number 8 answers that answer, and then you can go back and redo number 3. Like, is that somehow incorporated in our curriculum at all? Like teaching kids how to test so it's not so overwhelming?
So more so, I think in our CAP assessments, our end of year summative assessments from the state, yes. We're requiring them to do the interim assessments this year, which are like practice assessments leading up to the summative. And we've been really encouraging teachers to use the mini assessments, which are another opportunity for kids to look at sample test questions and kind of get an idea of how to approach that. You know, use the strikeout feature to mark out the ones you know are wrong and use some of those test taking strategies. FastBridge is a screener, so it doesn't really, those kind of things don't necessarily apply as well there because these are very basic level skills to say that kids are capable of reading. So they're not those more advanced skills that you're talking like, you know, they read a whole page and answer several questions, that there might be some key information in question 2 that would help you with question 3. So it doesn't really occur that way in FastBridge, which is just a screener to identify kids that need to be looked at more closely to see if they have reading problems.
Before you move on to middle school, that's where you're going next, right? Middle school?
Actually, I talked about those, getting ready to go to high school, but if you have more questions.
No school questions. So looking back at that first slide, kind of looking at the increase in the high risk and some risk over the last 4 semesters and the somewhat consistent but kind of flat over in like the 2nd and 4th grade. How do you attribute, or how do you feel like things we've been doing in regard to like integrating things like the science of reading and structured literacy?
Yeah.
And do you think we're seeing any gains because of that?
Yes, and when we get to the remaining slides, I think we'll be able to show you that. So can I come back to that
Sure.
question once we get through all that? Go ahead and do your high school and then
Okay.
we'll get into that.
Okay, so the high school does things a little differently because once a child achieves benchmark, they don't have to test the rest of the year. So we can't look at their data the same as we do the other ones. But I do have charts of where they are right now as far as percentages, and these are upside down. So green is still good and blue is good. The red is the lowest and the yellow is the some risk, okay? So from the fall to the winter, this is not on this graph. That graph is a total. But I want to tell you how much improvement they had at the high school. 9th grade went up 12% or had 12% more students meet benchmark. That's 68 students. So they had an additional 68 students in 9th grade that met benchmark from the first test. 10th grade, they had 10% more, which was 55 students. 11th grade had 10% more, which was 43 students. And 12th grade had 7% more, which was 25 students. And theirs is lower because of the early graduates as far as number of students, because they don't test as many students. Another thing that to point out with the high school that's not necessarily in this chart is that ESL improved and went from 20% to 35%. And the SPED students that are not gifted went from 12% to 20%. So they made huge gains this year at the high school level.
So kind of back to what you were talking about, science of reading, structured literacy, those are things that we've been talking about for a couple of years now are real gaps for our kids. And we had kind of targeted that as part of the reason why across the board kids aren't progressing the way that they should, is because they don't have the decoding skills and the foundation that they need to then get into some advanced reading skills. And part of that is because we were doing a balanced literacy system that we now know with the science of reading is not the right way to teach kids to read. So these upper grades, especially, they've been through a system for multiple years where they have not had the right tools in place. 2 years ago, we adopted Haggerty, which is a phonemic awareness program. And last year, we adopted UFly as a phonics program. So our WIG last year was for our kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade kids, 80% of them to meet benchmark. We're still not there, but you're gonna see in the next slides that we are making some good gains, some good progress. So kindergarten, this is just kindergartners this year. From the beginning of the school year until winter in December when they took the assessment on phonemic awareness, they are specifically asked to identify onset sounds. So if they're given a word like sap, they are asked to identify s-ap and recognize, to be able to isolate that beginning sound. We have 6.2% of kids that improved on that and got above benchmark between fall and winter. And then for kindergarten in the fall, they are, if they come in the fall, able to identify letter sounds for 6 letters, they are meeting benchmark. At winter and December, that goes up to 26. And so that's a pretty big leap. And our kids did not do great on that. We saw a 3% decrease, but it was a huge step. So not exactly what we wanted to see, but we are getting there. For 1st grade, again, that phonemic awareness this time is word segmenting. So being able to take all of the sounds in a word and isolate them. So for that same word sap, it would be s, a, be able to recognize there's 3 different sounds and what they are. Kids from fall to winter improved by 9.8% on that skill in in first grade. Again, our winter data for first grade, the CBM part is our biggest hurdle for kids. We go from sentence reading, let me get, the exact numbers. We ask kids to be able to read 12 words in those sentences at the beginning of the year. It goes up to 37 words in the winter in a passage. So that's another big leap. This 4.1% decrease is a decrease, but the last 2 years I've reported this data to you, I've been reporting 7 and 8% decreases. So we have at least closed that gap a little bit. Still not what we want to see, but it's getting better. We then took our data from kindergarten and first grade. So last year's presentation, put it beside this year's presentation, so we could look at what our kids performing, the same kids performing from one year to the next. So for onset sounds, or that phonemic awareness skill, when our first graders were in kindergarten to first grade in the winter this year, they've improved 15.5%. So that was a pretty good gain for that same group of kids going through our system. Kindergarten last year in the winter were asked to do letter sounds, and then to the CBM this winter, another big leap to go from letter sounds to reading a passage. And we lost 24% to below benchmark. So again, that's still something we're really targeting, because that first grade CBM, our kids are just not performing where they need to be.
When you say they're behind, like this -24, is it correct for me to say that the students are improving, they're just not improving at the same rate that the benchmark moves up by?
Right, and the type of task they're asked to do. I think our kids do well with skills in isolation. So letter sounds, reading individual words, but when you start doing decodable text, longer passages that they read, they struggle with putting all those skills together for the more complex task of reading a book or a passage. But if you give them skills in more isolated, like letter sounds, word reading, sentence reading, they do better. But when they get to actually reading a page of text, they kind of fall off the cliff. And that is a pretty big indicator that we've got to get kids practicing reading longer text more often. I think one drawback of our YouFly curriculum is it only has kids in decodables every other day as part of the lesson plan, and it needs to be every day. They've got to have that practice every day.
Do we still do the, I don't know what they call it, where the kids read at home and they send the papers home, and the papers sign off that we either read with the kid or the kid read with us? So, because I think when kids figure out that reading is fun, they're more likely to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think just about all of our elementary buildings send reading logs home. I don't think there's like 100% participation in sending those back. So, I mean, yes, they encourage it, but there's really no way to require them to do that at home. But in best practice, I would firmly believe that the kids who are doing that at home are the kids that we're seeing real progress with, because they're getting those opportunities to practice. For our second graders, from the beginning of the school year to winter, on that phonemic awareness skill, 20% of kids moved from below to above benchmark. For our CBM reading, they stayed the same. That percentage did not change from the beginning of school to winter. So even though the benchmark moved, the kids moved at that same rate, but not aggressively enough to move kids above that threshold. But when I compare those second graders to how they were performing last year, we moved 12% of kids above benchmark from winter CBM in first grade to second grade winter CBM, which number-wise, sorry, I've seen too many numbers today to have these memorized. They went from 37 words per minute in the winter in first grade to 84 in second grade. So that's a pretty big leap, and we still got 12% of them to move above that benchmark. So that was some good progress. Third skill, we moved 5% in the fall to winter above benchmark. And we lost 1% to below benchmark from the beginning of the year to winter on our phonics screener. But if we look at those same kids, when they were in second grade in the winter to third grade in the winter, 4.3% of them moved above benchmark with phonics in their phonics test. Our fourth grade winter data, the phonemic awareness skill, and really about third grade, we get 80% of kids above benchmark on that skill, and it stays that way throughout the rest of school. So 80% is what we really are looking for, because that 20% we can manage in interventions. Part of our problem has been, if you have 50% of kids not passing a phonics screener, it's not feasible to do interventions with 50% of your class and do them well. So we are targeting getting to that 80% threshold because it makes it manageable numbers for teachers to give targeted interventions and do them well and give kids as much time as they need. So that phonemic awareness skill, we get there at about third grade and are pretty consistent from then on with kids doing well. On phonics, from the beginning of the year to winter, we lost 3% to fall below benchmark. And again, those numbers for fourth grade went from 110 words per minute to 133 words per minute from fall to winter expectations. Now in third grade, if we compare those same kids, third grade in the winter to fourth grade in the winter, 23% of them moved above benchmark. So we had some pretty low numbers when these guys were in third grade, but in fourth grade, we're seeing a lot more of them up to move above benchmark. So if you look from fall to winter, our progress doesn't look the way we would like it to. But if we compare those same kids over time, over a 1-year span, we're seeing a lot bigger gains. So I think that the track that we've been on with UFly has been good. I think we are starting to see some improvement in numbers for kids. And so I'm pretty encouraged that in the spring, we're going to see even better data.
This is the fifth grade data. Like she said, on the left is the phonemic awareness. And for those fifth graders, they increased 4%, but they were still well over 80 to start with. But they're getting, I mean, eventually we would like 95, 96% of kids by the time they're in, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade to have those skills so that we don't have to worry about them. And the drop was only 0.2, which is pretty negligible. But what concerns me the most is the next slide. And that's where this is one of the groups where we had a really big drop from last year to this year. So as fourth graders, they didn't look too bad. And then when they got to fifth grade, we haven't had a good year so far with fifth grade. And it's, sometimes when we see data, we go and we look, okay, well, let's look in this building. Let's look in this building. And we see where, okay, it's one or two places but things are not going quite well. But this one is pretty much across the board in about every building. And so I've been trying to think about why, and I don't know yet. I'm still looking at data to try to figure it out. Sixth grade, both areas, they increased. And it's kind of unusual for that to happen once we get sixth, seventh, and eighth, especially in the phonics and fluency for us to have an increase, but we did with this group. And then go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying.
Okay, they had an 8% increase from last year in fifth grade to this year in sixth grade.
And I think at this time last year, we talked about that we were doing some targeted interventions in those. We really focused on fifth through eighth grades because K4, when we do training on UFly, we typically do it with all of the elementary teachers. The intermediate centers and middle schools, those teachers have never learned those kind of skills. Phonics is not part of what a lot of our middle school teachers learned when they went to college. Many of them have a high school ELA certification. So getting UFly going in those buildings was a real effort last year and a big focus. And I think some of this can be attributed to that we've started to use some of those programs to target those skills.
Was there any difference in the schools that have in 6th grade, sort of intermediate centers?
No, not really. In fact, some of the ones that go K through 6, their 5th grade numbers were real bad. So it could just be that group of kids. I mean, sometimes you have groups of kids that struggle all the way through, and we'll get it figured out though, and we'll make sure that they get that next increase, because we can't let them keep dropping. We just have to use those targeted interventions like they have been. And they've been working those into their building schedules. And so if they keep with that intense intervention, they will go back up. I wondered if it could be an adjustment going from 4th to 5th grade. But when I look at those other buildings that are K through 6 and it's happening there too, then probably not the reason, but you never know. I mean, it could be, that's a higher percentage of kids that are in those 2 buildings. 7th grade data was pretty negligible both ways. The plus 0.7 on the gain and the minus 0.5 on the decrease. So they pretty much stayed where they were in the fall, but they did make gains from last year.
But this kind of shows us that kids are showing that 1 year of growth, because there's not a huge data jump, and they had to have shown progress in order to meet the benchmark that grew. So I think a lot of our data shows that we have typical growth, which means 1 year of growth in 1 year of time, but that doesn't close gaps. And we need to have that more aggressive growth of 1.3 or more in order to close that gap. What this data is telling me is that we're growing, but we're not closing gaps.
And they did increase, had about 2.5% of kids from 6th grade to 7th grade got better, and moved up into those top 2 groups. I would say that'd be their interventions, because they're really focused on those interventions at KH and at Horsegood now. Same thing with the 8th grade that was with the 7th grade. There was a 1% on phonemic awareness, which honestly, when you're getting that close to 100%, 101% is pretty good there. And their decrease was 0.1. So pretty much the same thing as what happened with the 7th grade. One more, I think. Is that the right way? Yep. And this is a one group that did fall from 7th grade to 8th grade. But 1.5% is not, it's probably within the standard error. And I didn't look it up, but I would guess that it's got to be 2 to 3%. Okay, so what are some great things? First of all, we've had Haggerty in the schools for 2 years now, and UFly in the schools. And so we think that's really making a difference with the phonemic awareness. We're consistent from Garfield to our elementaries because they're also using Haggerty. So the kids have had it a whole year before they ever get to kindergarten, and that shows up in our kindergarten numbers.
Just to interrupt you, Michelle, I would say this year, looking at our kindergarten data, I was really excited at the beginning of the year because some of the schools we were seeing numbers that we've not seen in the past. So I'm hopeful that that trend will continue as we kind of move forward with that strong phonemic awareness background that they've had in preschool before they got to us.
What's our total student population of, how many of our kindergartners have gone through Garfield? Just percentage wise.
So I would say we've got just a little over 600 kiddos enrolled at Garfield right now. So probably if you split that number in half, because you got 3 and 4 year olds, probably about 300 between, we're running around 425. So probably about 75%. I don't have anything to, am I right with those numbers, Michelle? You're in the
well, 60%.
60%, Michelle says, okay.
It's 300, like, and that's with the class of
4, it was 75.
Well, our classes are bigger than 400 though.
About 1 quarter.
That's close to 5.
Okay.
Okay.
So anywhere between 60 and 70%.
Yeah.
And I think something, something to remember too is that Garfield services our most in-need students. So our kids that transfer from Russell go into Garfield. We have other community daycares, or I'm sorry, other community early childhood centers that other students, go to as well. But we know our highest needs kids go to Garfield. And so getting that early intervention, those early programming is really going to be a difference maker for those most at-risk students. And I would say in addition to Haggerty, Garfield has also switched to FastBridge, which has made it easier for us to track data from our preschool years into kindergarten and made it more useful for our kindergarten teachers because they can understand what that data means. When they were using MyIGDs, it was hard for our kindergarten teachers to understand what those scores meant because they weren't using the same test. So, and in addition, they have started Leader in Me this year. So those kids that start out at Garfield are going to be familiar with the social emotional program that most of our elementary buildings are using. So Garfield has really done a great job the last couple of years on getting in line with what our kindergarten students need and the programs that they're going to be transitioning into. And I think that's invaluable for those highest needs kids to get into those programs early.
Are you doing any of the tracking from those that are coming from the daycares or the early childhood centers?
We did 2 years ago, and actually I sat down with Garfield and we talked about there was no difference in the data in a kid who had been to Garfield versus a kid who had not. Now, you also have to keep in mind that those are our highest risk students, so for them to enter at the same place as kids that don't have those high needs, that was an accomplishment, but I think they really expected to see a huge difference in kids who had been to their program versus ones who had not. I did not pull that data and look at it yet this year, but it's certainly something I can get.
Just curious.
Yeah. But I think that really changed their trend from we do what we do because it's the right thing for kids to what is the kindergarten doing and what can I do to help prepare them for that? And it really changed their mindset having seen that data. And I mean, they've done a great job making things a more seamless transition for kids going into kindergarten.
Couple other glows. We have a lot of people letters changed or will be complete by the end of this year. We'll have 204 elementary teachers, 41 early childhood teachers, and 19 administrators by the end of the year will be trained in letters. And we are seeing positive trends in our data. Not every single place. We've got little pockets of some things that are concerning that will get figured out, but for the most part, things are really looking up. And the second grade is what really makes me feel good about Haggerty and UFly because they've had it for 2 years now. And their data is looking really good.
What percentage of our elementary school teachers is that 204 represent?
It's required for all of our K-3 teachers because the state of Kansas will not let them renew their license without having had letters training or pass an equivalent test or equivalent program. We have a lot of 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teachers as well. I can't tell you off the top of my head what percent that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Over 80.
Yeah,
K-4.
yeah. It's well over 80 and the plan is to continue moving forward with that. One of the things that here in the next year, we've had folks that have come out from the state and been our facilitators for letters training, and the state's moving away from that. And so they're actually doing like a trainer of trainers. And so we're gonna have 6 teachers. We'll have 6 teachers that will get endorsed to be letters facilitators for our school district. So we'll be able to offer the training in-house, which I think will make planning and organizing professional development for letters a lot easier for everyone.
And in addition, it's going to make it a lot easier because we'll have facilitators here that can go in and give teachers feedback. So we have to change our mindset from learning this stuff to implement it. So having those 6 people on staff are gonna make it more successful for us to support teachers in implementing the things that they learned in letters, because we don't want it to be sit and get and then forget. You know, we want it to be something that really becomes ingrained in what we're doing in our day-to-day teaching.
So can you break your data down by teacher?
We can.
So
We don't do that here,
I
but
understand that, but I'm just saying, so do you see a direct correlation between teachers that went to letters training early adapt, like some of the early ones, and the success in the classroom?
so the first year that we did letters training, those were all volunteers, and it was a cohort of 40 teachers. We did track that data that first year, because we were trying to decide if letters was something we wanted to require for more teachers or expand. And there was about a 20% difference in student performance if you had a teacher that was in letters training versus one who was not. And we have some buildings in the district that had coaches that were extremely strong in their knowledge of structured literacy. And we knew they were leading all of their staff that direction, but we could still see a big difference. If the teacher had been through letters training, they were more equipped to address the kids who were struggling in their classroom. And so we really do believe that in the long run, we are going to see the benefits of it. But I think right now we've got to get to where we really support some of the people who maybe are struggling to understand some of it or struggling to implement some of it. They have the knowledge, how do we use it? So this year we also added, let me step back a minute. Everything we're doing in FastBridge is just identifying kids that struggle. And the whole point is we're supposed to then go back and give them further assessments to determine what their need might be. So we've added some diagnostics this year that are helping them identify where are the gaps for this kid and what specifically do they need. And I feel like we've taken those assessments out of letters, and our teachers, because they're letters trained, are equipped to administer and understand what they're getting out of those assessments.
So I've been told that 1 in 5 kids have some level of dyslexia, right? So when we look and we have 20% on average of our students that are high risk, are we doing anything, any sort of kindergarten screener, any early screener for dyslexia amongst students as they come into our district?
Our FastBridge is our screener to identify kids with reading difficulties. We don't really screen for dyslexia. That's something you go to, I don't know if it has to be full on a doctor. Do you know, Josh?
I'm not talking about like diagnosing it.
Okay.
I'm just saying as a pre-screener.
So that's what we do with FastBridge. Our FastBridge is our screener to identify kids with reading difficulties. And it'll narrow it down to either phonemic awareness, phonics, or an overall score. A reading is more like comprehension and vocabulary. So we can look at those 3 sub-scores to kind of get a general idea of where their difficulty might lie. But we also know kids learn phonemic awareness first. They need to have that before they can do phonics. And they need to have that before they can read independently to get to the comprehension and vocabulary. So a kid who's struggling with phonemic awareness they will probably learn some phonics, but they're not going to be as successful as they could be if they had that foundation. So, we can dive into that data for each kid and kind of get an idea of where they're at and what we need to do to address it. FastBridge also gives some learning plans and some activities that you can do to address those skills, but they're not like super easy to follow because they kind of go all over the place. You click here, but then you've got to go over here, and teachers kind of complain, and not just our teachers. I've been to FastBridge trainings and hear it everywhere. It's not incredibly user-friendly for teachers to get in and take those activities and do them with kids. But does that answer your question?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, my main thing is, are we doing, what tools are we using to assess students that may have?
To identify.
To identify, yeah, not necessarily say diagnose them, but just to catch them early.
Right, and FastBridge and all screeners like FastBridge are intended to over-identify kids. Because those kids that are close, technically, we consider reading difficulties the 30th percentile, so the bottom 30th percentile. FastBridge identifies at the 40th percentile. So they're over-identifying by about 10 percentiles, because kids that are close, we want to make sure. Because everything that we do with screening is just, these kids, you should take a second look at. And then we should dive in deeper to try to figure out what problems they might have and then address them. So it is intentional that we over-identify kids. We know that things that we need to continue to work on and grow is our implementation of UFly. We've only been doing it for a year and a half. So there are some things, especially when you start talking about fluency, the speed with which we expect kids to recall things, we need to pick that up. Because that carries over to those CBM assessments. If kids really have to spend a lot of time sounding things out, they're not fluent. And that really shows up in our CBM scores. We need to increase the amount of time that we spend in connected text and decodables. Those are longer passages. You know, the amount of time that we keep kids practicing all those skills that we're learning in isolation will make them better readers. And then continue implementation of targeted interventions in grades 5 through 8. We know those kids came through a broken system with balanced literacy, and we have to address that if they're going to have an opportunity to be successful as they go on through the rest of the system. And then over the next year, we're going to be selecting a new ELA curriculum, one that will be in line with the science of reading. So it should equip our kids better from the very beginning. We have been having conversations in our office. Do we keep UFly? Do we go with whatever phonics program is in our new curriculum? There's a lot of things that we're going through at this time to try to find the right materials for Garden City.
What tools are you gonna use to ensure that the new curriculum you pick is fully in line with structured literacy and science reading?
We get a lot of guidance from KSDE right now. Actually, KSDE is partnered with TNTP, and they're giving us a lot of information about how to go through curriculums and identify which ones are high quality instructional materials. So there are resources like Ed Reports. Louisiana Department of Education also puts out, these are ones that have been heavily investigated, and they mark them as, I can't remember the right terminology, but it's green on Ed Reports. If it's coded green, then it's good. And they've just got different terminology, but you can dive in and then look more closely at what is its strength on phonics, what is its strength in phonemic awareness. And so we'll be relying a lot on those, because those are professionals that have really weeded through those materials and given us a good picture of whether or not those are strong in science of reading components.
We're gonna talk more about that, Andy, at the next board meeting. Heather's gonna share with you kind of the process that we're gonna do for the ELA adoption. Okay. What that's gonna look like. We'll walk you through that at the next board meeting. That's scheduled to be there.
Thank you.
Yep. I think, oh, and then I try to go back to this. This is a chart that comes out of letters. So these are all the different components of reading that we have been really working towards making sure that we have going well in Garden City. So those bottom ones, basic phonological awareness and more complex phonemic awareness, we feel like we're addressing those through Haggerty. Then phoneme, grapheme, correspondence, sight words, word families, we're addressing that through UFly. Common syllable, syllabication, also through UFly. Then we get into morphology. Inflectional morphology is a little bit simpler. It's like adding S so that you know it's plural, adding ing to know that it's current, ed means it's past. Some basic morphology, but our more advanced morphology are like scientific terms, and then our Greek and Latin roots, prefixes, suffixes. Those come in the upper grades, and we had a national presenter come in on January 7th to work with our high school and middle school teachers on how to address morphology in the classroom, especially in science and history classrooms, because there's a lot of morphology in those rooms. And so we want to start having those teachers understand the important role that they play with those aspects of literacy. Because a lot of those Greek and Latin affixes are scientific words that you're not gonna find in our ELA curriculum. So they need to be taught in those science classrooms and in those history classrooms so that kids have a way to attack a word that they don't recognize and they haven't ever encountered before. You know, if you teach a kid the word photosynthesis, they may memorize and know that that's the process that plants change light into energy. But if you teach them that photo means light, then every word that they encounter that has photo, they know it has something to do with light. And we've got, especially with our ESL population, give kids strategies to attack words that they don't recognize and don't know. So, but we are planning to have her come back on March 28th to complete her training session with them. But we feel like we've at least addressed all of these components so that we're doing a better job meeting kids' needs. I know you guys have given us lots of questions throughout. Do you have any others that you haven't given us yet?
It seems like there are certain grades that are tougher. Like, are we intentional at putting our better teachers at those grades? Sorry, teacher, that's not a very good question,
Yeah,
but you know.
those are questions that we've talked about. I mean, I know for a couple of years now, we've talked about, should we have long-term subs in those kindergarten and first grade rooms? Because those are critical years that if we got gaps at the end of first grade, the statistics are, it's extremely small percentage of kids that will become successful readers and make it up. Yeah, I mean, in fact, that winter CBM in first grade is a huge indicator. You can correlate how they did in first grade in winter to high school success on other assessments pretty closely. So that's an HR question as to how we place people, but it is something we've talked about.
It's it's complicated because Josh and I talk about it all the time. For our state assessments, it's third and fourth grade, so do you put your best teachers in third and fourth grade? Or do you put them in kindergarten, first grade to build up their reading ability to get to third and fourth grade? It's we need to get good teachers everywhere.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, ideally, that's the best idea, but like the first grade, it seems like there's some definite struggles with those first graders, and then I don't know what the next grade on up was, maybe third or fourth, and it's like.
The other thing that's odd, and I don't know why, and Josh might be able to tell you, it seems like we go through phases of elementary teachers that we have a bunch that want to be kindergarten, first grade teachers. Right now, all of our teachers want to be third and fourth grade teachers.
But 4 years ago, everybody wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. And typically what happens is when you're looking for a third and fourth grade teacher, everybody wants to be a kindergarten teacher. When you're looking for a kindergarten teacher, everybody wants to be a third and fourth grade teacher. That's just kind of Murphy's Law, it seems like.
But that's why it's critical to have high quality instruction in the classroom. It's just, when you have those gaps that it's almost impossible to make up, if we don't deal with it immediately in kindergarten, first, second grade, it's very difficult to come back from that for those students.
So if you can break the data down by a teacher to the teacher level or classroom level, what is our plan of improvement? Like if we have teachers that are consistently falling into a category where maybe their class is behind the rest of the district, how do we address that as far as training or some type of plan of improvement?
Right, and I'll jump in on that one. So the principal needs to know what's occurring on the campus, but most importantly, we have pockets that are doing really, really well and some pockets that are mediocre. So we definitely need to address it in that fashion. I don't have a question, but I'm going to say the 5 components of reading teaching reading is extremely difficult. So learning to read, phonics, phonemic awareness, the fluency, comprehension, the vocab, that's difficult. And they said it, but just so you heard it, most of our kids are growing a year. But if you're behind, you really need to grow 1.3 to actually get that stagger going. So the growth is K2, we don't want to get behind. Mr. Guyman, kinder, we're doing probably better than we ever had in the past 20 years.
I don't know that I would say that overall. I mean, but I'm definitely seeing that we're doing a lot in a lot of buildings. We're seeing some pretty major success. Yes.
And then we are getting to, I'd say away from, but the curriculum will be science of reading aligned, not balanced literacy. So there's going to be some correctiveness occur. And then to John, maybe what you're going to say is 4th through 6th, 4th through 8th. If we learned a balanced literacy model, we did as good as we could with the data that we had. Now that's old data. We need to get our 6 through 12 reading and writing frankly honed in and modified and have letters training with those individuals, which we are. Once we get our 6th trainer of trainers, that's going to help us and it's going to exponentially get us better. But anyway, John, I didn't mean to, if we can break down to the individual teacher, what you were saying. So there you go.
I was just saying, if we can break it down to that level, what are we doing to assist the teachers that maybe aren't? So they actually do break it, to get in the weeds a little bit, they do break it down to that level and then individualize where those gaps are within that specific room. That instructional coach is going in there to address those specific gaps inside. And we're talking minute indicators within a first grade room, not just the big idea. They break it down, and this is the secondary guy. They break down that standard even deeper, and those instructional coaches should be going in and working with those teachers to address where those specific gaps are, because oftentimes, and they kind of alluded to it, oftentimes it's maybe that teacher is focused on one piece longer than is required, and that causes a gap in another piece because of that overemphasis of one idea. Am I saying that? I mean,
your instructional coach is gonna, I mean, they meet, the buildings are gonna meet regularly in PLCs, and they're gonna look at that data. They're gonna have conversations about data, about specific kiddos in their PLC meetings, and then they'll put kind of an action plan together, I guess would be, for lack of a better term, what they would do. And then the coach is gonna go in and they're gonna observe the teacher and the principal too, and then they'll give feedback and talk to them about progress they're making, adjustments that they need to make within their instruction and how they're supporting those kiddos. So that's why I think instructional coaches are really important in their roles, because they do a lot of that.
Yeah, I would say the one thing that, it just being in this role a short time, sometimes our teachers just aren't in the right spot. And we've seen a lot of success of moving some teachers around to different spots that fits what they do better. And we've had some success with that. Sometimes they get forced into first grade because that's the only open position, but that's not where their comfort level is. So also trying to identify those teachers and get them where they can be successful is important. I just wanted to I appreciate that, because I just want to make sure that we had a plan, or we had to help those teachers.
And Drew and I moved quite a few teachers, well, I wouldn't say quite a few teachers, but we've moved some teachers this year, and we've seen success from them.
Thank you. And I think we've done a lot of work with TNTP over the last 3 years and how to give teachers instructional feedback and improve the practices in their room. And that's, with our WIG being around the structured literacy pieces, that's the feedback in those early grades that we're giving them. We're giving them action steps on, this is what needs to improve in your room. This is how it should be done. So the what and the how in the action steps to give them the feedback to improve their instruction. And principals are a critical piece of that. I mean, I don't want to say it's the coach's job. It is the coach and the principal together. The buildings where I feel like we have had the most growth have been where those relationships and the way that they work together are the strongest. And I know a couple of the buildings that I've worked with because we each take about of our time with. A couple of mine, it is the relationship between the coach and the principal. The coach gives the recommendations and the principal goes in to make sure they're being done. And those are where we're seeing our most success and our most growth in student success.
I think the principals I talk to and Josh talks to, they're optimistic about state assessments this year for the most part. We hear a lot of good things. We are a little concerned because the state assessment has been changed, so it's new. So it's gonna be kind of hard to judge it off of last year's numbers. Really what we'll continue to do is judge it off of peers to see how peer districts do compared to us. Currently, we're scoring much better than Dodge, higher than Liberal, on par with Junction City, those types of places. So when the state assessment data comes back out, we're not really gonna be able to compare it to last year's data. We're gonna have to look at where we at compared to our peers, compared to where we were a year ago this time.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I'm a little nervous about is the change in the test. Everything that we're hearing is that it's gonna be a lot more rigorous and a lot more complex than what they've seen in the past. And so that concerns me, but I would also say that we're seeing a lot more good things happening in the classroom than we've seen in the past too. So that's promising. I mean, I think one of the things that we talked about 3 years ago was when you go into a literacy classroom, you go into the ELA classroom, you want to see the kids in the text within 5 minutes. And that wasn't happening oftentimes. And now that's just commonplace now at the elementary level. The kids they're in the text and they're reading within 5 minutes of the time. There's a lot more writing in response to what they're reading and defending their answers with finding text evidence and supporting their answers and things like that we weren't seeing 2 and 3 years ago. So I'm excited about that. I mean, I do think when you talk about seeing change like that, it is a process, 3 to 5 years is what they say. And so this would be year 3. So I'm excited about that. I think hopefully we'll see some good trends.
And Heather and Michelle and that office, they have a big task in front of them. Just with, we're getting ready to move forward to ELA adoption. One of the struggles that they've talked to you guys about numerous times is just we've kind of hodgepodged our ELA curriculum together because of the change from balanced literacy to structured literacy. And so finally, I think that will help getting a curriculum that we're not piecemealing things together.
Right.
But it's gonna be a huge investment for a district and we've got to get it right.
But we do get a lot. I get a lot of, when I'm out in buildings, they're asking me, are we gonna be able to keep UFly? I mean, a lot of our teachers like it and they believe in it. And I've told them since we started, we're gonna have to have data that says that this is having impact or we can't stay with it. I mean, it's not fiscally responsible to stay with something that we're not seeing impact with kids. And it's not the right thing to do for kids. But so I was really encouraged that with our second year of UFly, we did see positive data and in some of those grades, significant positive data. So, I'm encouraged to look at our spring data, look at next year's, and then really factor in, do we want to switch or do we want to keep that piece? Because a lot of the feedback I'm getting from teachers is they really like it. And if it's working for kids, then, we may stay with that.
Any other questions? Well, I just want to thank both of you. You guys, every time you come and give these presentations, I feel like you do very open and transparent. You're not sugarcoating anything. You speak very openly about the challenges and the areas where we're falling short in what you're doing. And I just appreciate the hard work you do and the transparency you bring.
Well, thank you. I was looking forward to this presentation today, a lot more so than the CAP one that I gave in the fall. So this was a good one. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, unfinished business item I1, the Board of Education is asked to consider and approve a proposal for a new all-inclusive playground with ADA compliant turf at East Sherman School.
Good evening, board.
Only thing I understood about that was when they talked about Latin and Greek. It was Greek to me until then. They do an incredible job. I'm glad they're doing it, not me, so. Tonight, finally, a recommendation on the playgrounds, which we've worked at for quite a bit. I do want to make a quick, point out on the agenda item. It mentions turf. We have actually moved to, on the two bids, they're two different ones, a poured in place rubber compound, and the other one is a bonded rubber mulch. So that cheapened it up just a little bit going away from the turf. It still does make it good and for fall heights of 5 foot at this point. So actually, I think the other one is for a little higher fall height because it's got some higher slides on it. Basically, what we narrowed it down to, and then the board challenged me to go back to staff and visit with them as well. Again, we're pretty much very similar in price. The Next Gen or the Play World, which is the company that we've used with a lot of playgrounds, is now at 162,015. And then the Cunningham Recreation Game Time one that has the grant associated with it is 164,834.07. So about $2,800 difference between the two. When we sat down though at our last conference and discussed it with Principal Oaks as well as Ms. Galpin, we looked very closely at two of the play components. The other one for Play World I ruled out because of cost. I just said we had to take it off the table. Where it really boiled down to, and kind of reading the recommendation, the Play World equipment is consistent with what we have been installing in past years. It has the AeroGlide component for inclusive play along with ramps throughout. It is also proposed in Edith Sherman school colors, which Brandy liked. The Cunningham Recreation proposal offers a few more play components and also ramps throughout the play area for inclusivity, but does not have a centerpiece item similar to the AeroGlide. That was something that both pointed out as well. Principal Oaks is good with either proposal. Ms. Galpin prefers the Next Generation Play World option if SPED funds are to be used because of the AeroGlide component. So after the conversation that we sat in on, myself and Brad Stopcott were on that call, it's Plant Facilities recommendation to follow, since we are using SPED funds, to go with Ms. Galpin's recommendation that we're all good with and do the Play World component. Both good. The AeroGlide area, if you've looked at the pictures, is kind of an area where a kiddo in a wheelchair can actually get on with the wheelchair from the ramps. Both of the recreation equipment dealers, if you talk to them, when we go to adding those ramps, it really drives the cost of these up. Obviously, we've got a SPED program here, and we want to, from an inclusivity standpoint, be able to put it all together in one, and this will allow us to do that. But that's the recommendation that I've got at this time, and I'll stand for questions.
So this bonded river mulch, is that loose river mulch or?
No, it looks loose, but it's actually got a clear rubberized coating. It's kind of a poured in place after it gets put on there. They put it out and then pour it over, so it's a bonded, solid structure once it gets done. Because I read that, I said, no, we're not going with that. And so he corrected me.
Okay. Any questions? We have the finances budgeted for this.
Yep, it was right at 164 with this, with 50,000 coming from SPED.
On the finances, one thing that Brandon's working on now is making sure that we have playground equipment in our long range facility plan. Something that over the years has been left out of our long range facility plan, but finally getting it in where we have it, over a 20-year period, have a plan for addressing it.
Because everyone's gonna want it after this one.
And it's actually, this was in it. And then we've got 2 more projects forthcoming, but we need to get an assessment done and figure out where the needs are and add them into that long range plan. And this is turnkey. All it requires us to do is put the concrete ramp up to it.
When will this project be completed?
This summer, if we get it approved pretty quickly, we can get it on the docket for this summer.
And the recommendation is the next generation Play World. Is that correct?
Yes, yep, at 162,015.
Anybody care to make a motion? Okay. So will this be in addition to the playground equipment that's there, or will we remove some of the playground?
Yeah, it'll be in addition to it. Part of too, and then one thing I did with some of the other campuses, the sped playgrounds are separated off. If you go by JDA's on the side, if you go to VO, theirs is back by the sped classroom. We talked about putting a small sped playground right outside the door because Brandy was a little concerned about runners. But we talked also about they've got a large kind of a blank slate right out there past the sidewalk that would be good to put this in. There's a fence going to go around it as well to protect for those runners. So they just have to get them there. So that's the inclusivity point. I mean, a lot of our sped playgrounds aren't included with other playground equipment, but this allows for everyone to play at one time if that's what they desire.
Any other questions? Would you like to make a motion on this?
I can make a motion. I'll make a motion to go with the recommendation for Play Facilities on the Play World, right?
Next generation Play World, yeah.
That one there.
Okay. Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your left hand. Can Randy speak? Randy raises. All right. All right. Motion carries. Thank you, Randy.
That's hilarious.
All right.
I feel like that's his right.
Yeah, yeah, that is his right hand, actually.
I gave you a left thumb.
Okay, moving on to new business item J1. I don't get it.
I don't give you paper anymore.
I know. Did you email?
I thought maybe you guys want to look at it. So.
Okay, district calendar, 2026, 2027 district calendar, first read, your tone.
So just a little background, over the past 3 months, we've had our calendar committee meeting as the negotiated agreement asks for. We've met, I don't even remember how many times, a lot of times, to discuss, and what we're discussing is the 26-27 school calendar. I talked to you guys a little bit last time about a preview. This past week, on Monday of last week, the calendar committee finalized their recommendation to send to the staff to be voted on. We sent 2 different calendars. One was a traditional calendar. The other was one that takes all federal holidays off. The traditional calendar ended up getting just over 66% of the vote. If you look at the traditional calendar, I did provide you guys with the major part of the survey that we ask both parents and staff members about. And that is how important are specific days off to you. This traditional calendar meets kind of the criteria set out by both the parents and the staff members. It takes off Labor Day, that whole week of Thanksgiving break, the 2 weeks of Christmas break, and the Friday and the Monday surrounding Easter. So this calendar does all of those things. Like we talked about in the past, one of the big differences is on the October 12th date and the February 15th date, because and we've had to explain this to a couple teachers already that have asked, because of how we are doing parent-teacher conferences. You'll see on the 26th of February and the 23rd of October, those are those Fridays of parent-teacher conferences. We actually don't have parent-teacher conferences on those days. We just schedule them as that day. And what ends up happening is the teachers in the building, they do all those hours for that day prior to after school outside of contract time. So they're on a lot of, like at the high school, a common day is Wednesday. At Horse Good, a common day is Wednesday. Some of the elementary schools have pushed it back even the week before into the week of the 12th of October and into the week of the 15th of February. So what we did was the teachers wanted to move that work day prior to when anybody was going to have conferences so that they could have that work day prior to those conference dates after school, and they would be able to get their grades done, get their homework graded, all those things. So we moved those dates. The teachers wanted to move those dates to that Monday so that they had a little bit more time in preparing. The other thing that it's a big thing for elementary schools to get their grades turned in at the quarter. That 12th date in October allowed them to get their grades turned in at quarter. The other quarter posting grade is over right by spring break. So that should help elementary teachers with those quarterly grades. The other big changes next year's calendar has 2 back-to-back days in September. This calendar in 26-27, we do not need those days for professional development, so we were able to put those back in a normal, what we'd call a normal spot at the beginning of the school year in August. And then the only other significant change is December 18th. We went ahead and put an in-service day there. We have at the high school, it's a fairly big deal. We have a lot of people that graduate at semester. And one of the big issues that the high school runs into every year is getting grades posted before the kid goes to college second semester. Because prior to being able to do this, we had to post over Christmas break. And so those teachers of those students were having to make sure they got their grades in over Christmas break when they were technically supposed to be off, so the kid could turn around and go to college after Christmas break. So this should help alleviate that issue. The only other strange thing is just where Easter falls. We never like having Easter butted up against spring break, but that's just the nature of where Easter falls and where spring break on the KSDE and the Kansas Board of Regents ends up falling. So this is a first read and only a first read. We'll bring it back and put it on consent if you don't have questions next time, or if you do have questions, I can stand for questions next time as well. Any questions on this, Mark and Jackie? Who was on calendar committee this year? You, was there? I don't remember. I know you were. Yeah,
I was.
So. John, I did give them a preview of the calendar that's coming for the next one. I'm gonna reduce it all and that'll be one of the options. Any other questions? All right, it'll be on consent agenda if you don't have questions next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item J2, the Board of Education is asked to consider and adopt the following new policies. Policy JBCD, student and district transfers, and JCED, pledge of allegiance.
So, first policy is the policy that we had talked about, last time with in-district transfers. And so I worked with Jennifer and, this is kind of the draft that we come up with. Basically outlines everything that we want to do. Put some deadlines in there for parents when they have to have that and also requires the kiddos to be in good standing at the school that they're transferring out of to go into another school. And so there puts a little accountability on the kid and on the parents as well. And so that's the first policy. That would be JBC. Good night. JBCD. And then the next policy is JCED, which I was asked to put a policy together for the Pledge of Allegiance. I will tell you that I talked to Jennifer about this, and Jennifer did some research and looked at school districts around the state that have similar policies. And so she just drafted this using language from other districts around the state that have that. I have gotten some feedback about the first paragraph, removing that. And then just going with the other two paragraphs where it specifically focuses just on the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm fine. If that's the direction that you all want me to go, just let me know and I can have Jennifer clean that up and have a cleaner version to send out to you to preview before we have the next board meeting in March. So I'd just like to get feedback from you all if there's.
Yeah, I'd like to separate those. I don't have much issue with the first paragraph. We just may want to make that a different policy because it doesn't really apply to.
Sure.
It's confusing to me that it's in that policy, so.
Yeah,
I don't have any issue.
I thought the same thing, so.
Well, and if,
And the other thing is
do you want it to be may instead of shall?
that was the other thing I was gonna
Because
say. I
shall
would like to have
basically
May.
means you have to.
If we want to do that, and the other thing is, I will say that, like Constitution Day, we have state statute that says we have to have some kind of a lesson on Constitution Day that we do with every kiddo. And so that's gonna happen regardless of what our policy says, because we have state law that says we have to do that, or state statute that says so. So is that the direction you guys want me to just focus on the pledge? Are we all good with that?
Yep.
Okay. I'll talk to Jennifer. I'll get that cleaned up. Everything else look okay? Okay. Any questions on either one of the policies?
Include like Thanksgiving and stuff in there since we don't have school those days.
Yeah, we're just gonna take I'll take that whole paragraph out.
But if we do a separate policy.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Are you recommending we just delete that first paragraph or write
Well-
a separate policy? I don't have an issue with that first paragraph. I mean, I think it'd be good to have a policy just saying, hey, we can celebrate these appropriately. I just don't think it fits with the pledge. So what I would like to do is focus on the pledge and then have Josh rework
create another policy for that one.
Policy. I mean, I don't want to get heavy on policies, but
And we don't have to do a policy on that, because I will tell you that a lot of those things at the elementary level especially, they're gonna do stuff the whole month of November for Thanksgiving. They're gonna do stuff. Veterans Day, I mean, you all see that we usually have, especially at the elementary schools, we have a big celebration for Veterans Day. I mean, there's a lot of those things that are already happening. I'm fine putting a policy together if y'all want me to, but I don't know that it would change anything from what we're already doing. So, my recommendation would be just to leave it the way it is, but I'll follow the direction that the board gives me on that.
I'm fine with that. I think we should focus on the pledge, and then if we feel like we need to address that in the future, we can.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'll get that cleaned up and send out a new, so you guys can see a copy of that, and then it'll be on the consent agenda in March, or next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item JEA, Hubert Elementary School flooring discussion. Brandon Anderson.
I apologize, Ward. I think you just got these today. Is that correct? Does everybody have these? The bid tab that came in?
Yeah.
Okay. So with it, basically bidding out flooring, in the long range plan, we had flooring for 3 campuses, Abe Hubert, Jenny Barker, and Plymel. We decided to hold pat on Plymel and Jenny Barker, but we did move forward with bidding at Abe Hubert. We got 3, we sent it directly to 5, hoped we'd get 5 bids. We get 3 bids though back, and all of them were very good bids. So we bid them in two categories, and the letter will tell us in a bit from GMCN. The base bid was 8,500 square foot, and then the alternate bid was 4,700 square foot, just to see what those bids would look like coming in. So with that, your base bid, you can see that from J&M Paint and Garden City was 63,000. Vistum out of Hayes was 60,700. And then Star Lumber out of Wichita was 50,796. The alternate for that other 4,700 square foot, J&M was 37,800. Vistum out of Hayes was 34,000. Star Lumber out of Wichita was 29,461. So total bids for those 3, J&M was 100,800. Vistum was 94,700, and Star Lumber was 80,257.38. The letter from GMCN issued construction drawings and specifications to remove and replace flooring at Abe Hubert Elementary School on January 22nd, 2025. There was one addendum on this project that was issued by our office to clarify any items the flooring contractors had inquired about. The bid was broken down into base bid flooring areas totaling approximately 8,538 square foot or 12 classrooms, and alternate A1 flooring areas totaling approximately 4,757 square foot or 5 classrooms and miscellaneous offices and storage areas. On February 11, 25, there was a public bid opening held at our office. There were 3 flooring bids submitted by both in-town and out-of-town contractors. The bids were opened at 2 o'clock, and based on the combination of base bid and alternatives, you will have the same apparent low bidder. As we have discussed, it is my understanding that you would like to accept alternate A1 with base bid. With these items, Star Commercial Flooring is the lowest bidder for the bid of $80,257.38. As we had 3 qualified contractors bid the project, GMCN recommends contracting with the apparent low bidder, Star Commercial Flooring, to complete this work. Please do not hesitate to call me with any questions or concerns. We appreciate the opportunity to serve USD 457 once again. So recommendation of GMCN, the recommendation of plant facility staff is to accept the apparent low bidder of Star Lumber from Wichita, Kansas, with an amount of $80,257.38 and a 14-day turnaround on that if they would do that project this summer. Yes, we have used them before.
What's in those classrooms right now?
All of them are being used. There's carpet in there with the exception of one that's just LVT. And it'll just be covered, but the rest of them are all carpet. 2 of them aren't, when I say they're all being used, 2 of them are vacant right now. They don't have an actual classroom on it, in it, but the other ones are in very poor shape. And that's why we kind of bid them in the category that we did. But the bids came in favorable enough. I think we should do it all at one time. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of going to look at maybe doing the library and the music room where the risers are, and see what we could get that done to, and maybe come back with a change order on this particular project because of the budget.
Is there any abatement that needs to happen? Is there VAT in those rooms?
No, there won't be any abatement.
The base budget was 125,000.
Yes.
So this with alternates is even below that initial budget.
Yes.
Are you seeking board action tonight?
I would like to be able to get them approved, and so they can get it on their calendar and make sure we're locked in and get a contract.
Okay. Any questions for Brandon? So if you bring us a change order, we'll just add it to.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and if we can come in agreement on a change order, I'd like to do it in advance of the project, just so you'll know prior to what we're doing.
Would you like to make a motion? Mr. President, I move that we move forward with Star Lumber out of Wichita, Kansas, in the amount of $8,257.38 for the flooring that we building.
I'll second.
Okay, we have motion and second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your left hand. Signal with an emoji online. All right, motion carries. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank y'all.
All right. Move into item A, board open discussion. Start with you, Robin. Turn your mics on as you do
Oh,
this,
yes.
please.
Appreciated the kids, interesting to hear all that history when it's someone that I actually know. Really appreciated the reading presentation. As Andy said earlier, I like that the ladies give us facts, whether they're pretty or they're not, and looks like we're headed in a positive direction. The grow well, that's kind of an interesting thing. I'll be interested to have some more discussion and see where that goes. And I'm ready to not have cold weather. Not this week. That's all I got.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I would echo a little bit of what Robin said. I think, I thought the VO presentation, specifically the students, I thought that was a great presentation by the students. I was impressed with their ability to articulate their portion of the presentation. Obviously, they'd spent a lot of time and hours memorizing and studying Victor and Alice to do that. So I thought that was great. I do also echo the comments on the Fast Bridge. You know, I appreciate that we review that and that we have a desire to not only identify the areas that need work, but to work to solve those areas. And so I appreciate the work that they're doing there. So that's all I got.
I also enjoyed the VO kids. It was kind of a different approach than some of the schools we've done, so that was pretty good. Same with, I'm always good to hear what Heather and Missy have to say, but I like that they can always answer our questions, and that's really helpful. And it's gonna be cool this week.
So I'm next. One thing I think it's really unique and special about what we do in our district is that our buildings, most of our buildings are named after someone, some individual that's had a major impact on our school district. And at least in the time I've been on the board, I think this was the first time where that student lifestyle team presentation focused on telling that individual story, which I thought was really cool. And then the students just did a really awesome job of presenting. So same comments about the winter data update and I feel like I know that Michelle and Heather put a lot of effort into what they do and they care a lot about what they do, and that we're moving in the right direction and it's great to know that we're not ever feeling like what we're doing is good enough. So Randy, you may or not. Okay.
Maybe not.
We'll go on to Nathan.
Echo what everybody said already. I love being VO kids. I know we were at the board faculty meeting over there and had a good experience at the building as well. Had some great conversations with the teachers there. So it was good to see them here presenting as well. And so definitely appreciate all the work of each and every one that's in the central office here. We saw Heather today and her crew, but there's a lot of others that are working hard behind the scenes to make everything come together. So appreciate all of them. Definitely want to say thanks to all of the grounds and the maintenance folks, Brandon's crew out there taking care of everything, making sure everything's working and the schools are safe, keeping people safe getting in and out of school with the snow that we've had last couple of weeks, and I know they'll be busy again. here in a couple days or the next day or two. But I just want to say thanks to everybody who works together to make that all happen, and safe for the kids, the bus drivers as well, as they're out there on the roads, and everybody's been safe. So huge thanks to just the entire team making this district the best district in the state.
Okay. Congratulations to our girls wrestling team. We're sending 13 to state, right? That's great. That is wonderful. Hopefully boys do something very similar. The VO presentation, I always think it's great to watch the students present. And I think, one of the things that I think everybody has a fear of, especially growing up, is presentations and speaking in front of people. So having those students do that at these the different schools do it, but tonight I thought VO did a great job. Pledge of Allegiance. Again, they say that with enthusiasm. I really like that. The winter data that we were presented tonight, some good information, and I think Heather and Michelle answered all the questions. There's transparency there. Yeah, we have places we need to work on, and I think they're identifying them. Good questions from the board, I thought, too, and asking some of, where how deep can we get down and drill to what the problem is, or what maybe a solution might be. So that's always great to be able to take it down to that level and then see what we can do to address those areas in which we have some outcomes that are not quite what we want to see at this point in time. So and ditto on what everybody else said too. So thank you.
Dr. Dominguez.
Yes, thank you. Once again, VO did a great job. That's a very special group that came and presented. You're right. They give the history on Mr. Ornalis and then his story. That's powerful. So from him to those humble beginnings to get a building named after him after being principal, that's humongous. Definitely love the data. 5 components of reading is always going to be near and dear to our heart. Early childhood, kinder, first, second, third, all the way through. The adoption of the new curriculum, that'll be next time around on the ELA. And that's going to be a big one because number one, it's going to be costly, but have it for 7 years, but also it to be the right fit and move the district forward. You're just going to see leaps and bounds on the secondary level because those students are already on the U-Fly and the Haggerty, and they're just going to keep moving through. Thanks to Brandon's crew, the maintenance crew, playground equipment is always going to be important. Rotating that into the actually long-range facilities plan is huge. We have to plan for that. It just can't be something that's left on the back burner because playground equipment doesn't last forever. So we definitely have to plan for it and then do best fiduciary duty moving forward. The flooring with the different buildings, anytime you have 1.5 million square feet of flooring, it's going to have to be addressed, and we're just going to keep moving forward. Mark said it, 13 girls going to state. We had that conversation before. That's going to be phenomenal. We got a very, very strong girls team. The boys wrestled this weekend, regionals. That's here Friday and Saturday. So looking for a great showing on those. Those individuals, of course, basketball going into postseason also. So we're just on the 4As. Academics, clearly, we're pushing hard. Arts, we're definitely strong in the arts. Ag, we still got to, Jackie, we're still going to keep pushing ag. And then also on the athletic side, we're strong and make ourselves a destination district. So you're right, you're the best district in the state. So thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, item L, next board meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Education will take place on March 3rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. in the board meeting room at the Education Support Center, 1205 Fleming Street, Garden City, Kansas. Item M, executive session. After the completion of all other business, the Board of Education will adjourn to executive session for the following reasons. First one will be item M1, matters related to employer-employee negotiations, whether or not in consultation with the representative or representatives of the body or agency.
Mr. President, I move we go into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss negotiations for the 2024-25 school year pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA beginning at, we do 8:05. PM, and the open meeting will resume in the board meeting room at 8:20 PM. I would like to invite Rutone, Jessica Northern, Josh Guyman, and Dr. Dominguez to join us in executive session.
Okay, have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All those in favor, raise your left hand. Motion carries.